With the march of time and technology, humans as a species have both gained and lost more than we could possibly know. I'm no primitivist. Modern sanitation, medicine, scientific knowledge, and so on are an undoubted social good. But at the same time, it's not unreasonable to lament the rapid and still ongoing atomization, individualization, and alienation of society. There are many forms that this takes, enough for an essay in themselves, even without too deep an examination of their causes and consequences. But I would argue that one area where our sense of community and commonality still thrives, where the relentless march of technology has perhaps even helped it to do so, is in storytelling. This might seem counterintuitive. Talking in a cinema is frowned upon, and even if we take the silent, enraptured viewing of a film to be a collective act, I would argue strongly that it is, the practice is dying with the ongoing domination of on-demand streaming services and pressures such as various cost of living crises pushing us to consume movies the way we do TV, in our own homes, shut away from everyone else. This was already the case with books, curling up with a good book being the ultimate cozy antisocial activity, even if you do it in the presence of other people. And as for games, well, the games that thrive when it comes to storytelling are single-player experiences. And if you ask gamers what they look for in a multiplayer, last on that list, if it comes up at all, will be narrative. But that's not the whole story. Just because we don't all sit around a campfire to listen to the touchstone stories of our culture being passed on orally, doesn't mean we've lost the collective traditions entirely. Only that they've evolved. The best of film and television are still the subject of conversation around the water cooler, or on the journey home for those of us that still go to the cinema. Gamers will talk endlessly, even with strangers, about the stories that capture our imagination. We analyse, dissect and debate intent, meaning and impact as intently and incisively as people do with TV, movies and books. There are more people in the world than ever before, and yet this discussion is easier than ever. Anyone can make a video essay on YouTube, and everyone can voice their thoughts in comment threads, social posts and forums. Sure, there's plenty of toxicity. If anything, some sites enable and promote it far too much. But it no longer matters if you don't have access to a platform in traditional media, or if the people you know locally don't share your taste in games, or you don't have a nearby book club to engage with. The conversation is everywhere, and collective ways of engaging with stories we love are more in reach than they were even 2 decades ago. Again, fully exploring the impact and implications of this, good and bad, is an essay all in its own right. From, on the one hand, the fact that toxic movements and ideologies have been far better at capitalizing on this than more socially progressive ones, and that you're far more likely to incur vicious backlash up to and including harassment for liking something than for disliking it, to, on the other hand, traditional media's inability to shape consensus even on something of as little consequence as whether a game is good or bad. Meaning that they absolutely cannot manufacture consent over their attempts to deny genocide, to platform harmful politicians, or to weaponize the language of anti-racism whenever the neoliberal consensus is even mildly threatened. And of course, if you talk about that, then you have to look at why there's so little overlap between skepticism of games media and skepticism of news media. Because those readily constructing conspiracy theories around positive reviews of a walking simulator will more often than not embrace the narratives that continue to shift politics rightward. But as broad a topic as all of that may be, it connects back to how we tell and consume stories. Because the stories we tell are a reflection of the world we live in. How could they not be, unless we were to isolate ourselves from the world and everything in it entirely? And if we did, how could we possibly have any interesting stories to tell? And what would be the point if there were nobody to engage with, react to, or be moved by them? Ahead of the recent release of Directive 8020, the latest choose-your-own-adventure style horror game from Supermassive Games, I was one of those invited to check out the game early. As part of this, aside from the usual and expected setup of a place to play the game, there were a plethora of other cool things to do. Photo booth where they took a photo and turned you into a creature from the game, a stall where you got a 3D scan of your face to turn into a chocolate lollipop, and a horror maze where you could enjoy a curated live action experience connected to the narrative of the game. There's a marketing reason for all of this, of course. Curating a positive experience in order to maximize the chance of positive organic promotion of the game by journalists and influencers to those who follow them. But you can do this well enough with little more than a rig to play the game on, a chance to talk to the developers, and a space for socializing and photo ops. The inclusion of a horror maze in particular was interesting because, again, it was a way to engage collectively with a story through interactivity. Something that Supermassive Games have always embraced. From their choice-based story outcomes getting people talking and comparing choices, to the addition of both online and couch co-op as the series has progressed. The maze experience starts with the premise that you're being vetted to take part in the spacefaring mission that we undertake in the game, with a series of psychological tests that start off simple enough with the Rorschach test. And of course, the fact that participants start giving slightly unhinged answers, both to see how the actor in the scene reacts and to egg each other on to do the same, means that we all become more engaged.
And you? Sticking with the animal thing, yes. I'm going to say spatchcock chicken. Oh, another dead one. Another dead pig. Oh, chicken. Just to confirm, a dead chicken. Cooked, yes. Cooked. Yes.
Fiction is about the willing suspension of disbelief. And in a setting like this, that is easier and more fun if we're all in on it. So, of course, when the alarm sounds to indicate that something is wrong, that sense of excitement easily translates to shock and fear. Especially when a cast member gets grabbed before our eyes and lets out an ear-splitting scream.
Guys, I think you might just make it.
The shock you feel is real. The excitement of the situation and the screams it elicits from the rest of your group locking you in further. And so you're actively engaged with the scenario that your rational brain knows is made up and cannot do you any harm. Adults jumping at the scares in a horror maze, or a video game or a movie, isn't all that removed from kids telling ghost stories to scare each other at a sleepover, or around a campfire. That, in turn, has a tangible connection back to the keepers of the oral tradition, recounting myths by a roaring fire in a long hall or under the stars. And then, as now, the stories told were a reflection of the world around them. The gods of ancient Greece, and other pantheons, were political actors as much as anything else. Their actions in myth used to justify social norms, claims to righteousness or rule, the collective self-image of city-states, and more. Just as modern stories allow us to explore the nature of power, tyranny, freedom, love, guilt, and more through fiction. Mythology, of course, was a way to not only explore meaning related to the politics and philosophy of the day, but also provide answers that they didn't have. The Greeks were far from alone in viewing the mountains as footholds to the heavens, and the stars as the image of the gods and others who dwelt there. And we're still doing the same today. Sure, science has taught us a lot that the ancients only had gods as an answer for, but the nature of science is that of a continuing quest to answer the unanswered, to expand the bounds of our knowledge. And while in many forms religion and faith have become static or dogmatic, though not always, and for many faith can be a path to hope and resilience without closed-mindedness, scientific advances not only give us a much greater knowledge base, but also more fertile ground for storytelling in the gaps in that knowledge. Just as the people of the past looked up to the stars and created gods and monsters to tell the story of where they came from, we look to the stars to speculate on where we're headed. And while we may no longer create gods, we've not stopped producing monsters. At the start of Directive 8020, we're told that the crew of the Cassiopeia is being sent to Tau Ceti F, a potential super-Earth orbiting in the habitable zone around the star Tau Ceti, in order to survey the planet ahead of the arrival of the Andromeda, which will begin efforts to colonize the planet, presenting potential salvation for humanity, seeking to escape a dying Earth. Those familiar with Greek mythology will know that Cassiopeia was the mother of Andromeda, as well as the Queen of Ethiopia, who brought about the ruin of her kingdom with her boasting and carrying the wrath of Poseidon. To save herself, after consulting with an oracle, she sacrifices Andromeda in the hope of appeasing the gods. This comes into play in the story. The crew of the Cassiopeia crash on Tau Ceti F and discover an alien organism that can replicate any biological life form, creating mimics to trick and prey on the crew. Those who survive, as determined by the player's choices and gameplay, seek out the unmanned probe Charybdis, which was sent to the planet ahead of them, in order to use it to send a message back to Earth. At which point they discover the truth, that they're not the first Cassiopeia to reach the planet and call for help after interacting with the life form. They are not the first them, and there is a question of if they are them at all, since they are clones into whom the consciousness of the original crew, safe on Earth, was uploaded. So although the Andromeda is not coming, only more Cassiopeias, each iteration teaching Earth more about the life form, the original Cassiopeia is still sacrificing her children, as her mythological counterpart did, in order to save herself from destruction. Although not at all the same kind of story, the crew of the Cassiopeia share a lot of common ground with Dr. Ryland Grace from Andy Weir's novel Project Hail Mary. Dr. Grace is, like the clones of the Cassiopeia, not only on a suicide mission to save Earth from an inhuman extraterrestrial enemy, but involuntarily so. When we first meet Grace, he cannot remember his own name or how he got where he is, and details emerge slowly as the story progresses. The memory loss is presumed to be a side effect of his 4 years in suspended animation through a medically induced coma, but turns out to be the result of a drug that was used to hide the fact that he had been forced on the mission against his will until it was too late. The life form that threatens Grace's Earth also comes from the Tau Ceti solar system, though we don't know that immediately. Only that it, a microscopic life form called astrophage that feeds upon solar energy, is responsible for the dimming of all local stars except for Tau Ceti, the resulting temperature loss on Earth threatening to cause a global extinction event. Project Hail Mary is, ultimately, a hopeful story in which the human race holds the potential to undo its own extinction, but it still grapples with the anxieties that dominate our collective imagination in this era. Nuclear weaponry detonated under the Antarctic offers a temporary reprieve. The release of massive amounts of methane both heating up the atmosphere to counter the immediate effects of the sun's dimming, and in the long term naturally dissipating in a way that carbon dioxide wouldn't. But even this comes at a cost. Alongside the heat sink in the Sahara Desert that is used to produce the fuel for the Hail Mary mission, the methods of bringing about the Earth's salvation have a human cost in the resulting adverse weather phenomena, while even the apparent unity of the planet in working towards the Hail Mary launch doesn't dispel the spectre of violent conflicts over resources in the years it will take the Hail Mary to complete its mission, and the ways in which those conflicts will only exacerbate that resource scarcity. We don't spend too much time with the cause of Earth's demise in Directive 8020, but ecological disaster is heavily implied, and unlike in Project Hail Mary, humans appear to be the cause of their own doom. Rather than being a unified effort of the planet's nations, the Cassiopeia is funded by the megacorporation Corinth, named after the Greek city-state that lay between Athens and Sparta. Through the game, we can find many pieces of propaganda regarding Corinth's humanitarian work to save the planet, while the words and actions of its CEO, Williams, or rather his clone, who knows the truth from the start and deceives the crew, suggest they are more akin to Weyland-Yutani, driven by profit and with a disregard for the human cost of their endeavours. The power and inhumanity of corporations is a common theme in science fiction, of course, and they often play a similarly morally ambiguous role to the gods of ancient myth. That parallel here underlined by the references to Greek mythology. The sea monster Cetus was to be Poseidon's wrath against Cassiopeia, and Tau Ceti is named for its place in the constellation Cetus. If the clones of the crew of the Cassiopeia stand in for Andromeda, sacrificed to provide salvation for their parent, the mimic life form stands for the sea monster to whom she was sacrificed. But unlike the mythical Andromeda, whose fate was only averted when she was rescued by Perseus, the crew here have a choice. But it's not an easy or simple choice. To accept death for the greater good, or to resist the gods of Corinth and fight to live. The vehicle for this choice is their ability to send a transmission, either an SOS or a warning, via the Charybdis probe. The sea monster Charybdis sat on the opposite end of the Strait of Messina from the sea monster Scylla, giving heroes such as Odysseus the hard choice between Scylla and Charybdis, an idiom we know better as between the devil and the deep blue sea, or between a rock and a hard place, denoting exactly the kind of tough choice that the crew of the Cassiopeia must make. Grace faces a similarly tough choice when, after being granted a way to get home by the alien Rocky, who is on an identical mission to save his planet Erid from the astrophage, he manages to solve a problem that nearly scuppers the whole mission. But this is a problem that is likely to leave Rocky stranded and his planet doomed. He can push on back to Earth, live and save the world, but know that Rocky and his world will die. Or he can send an automated response back to Earth, per the original plan, and go after Rocky. He can save both worlds, but only at the seeming cost of his own life. Grace makes the hard choice, and his sacrifice is rewarded by the grateful Iridians, who provide a way for him to live on their world despite the hostile environmental and gravitational conditions. During the horror maze, we were faced with a choice of our own, when it was revealed that one of the actors had been duplicated by a mimic, and we had to decide which to save and which to kill. My Horror Game Awards co-host Ash Millman argued for the less than noble choice to kill both in order to be safe.
Which one do you choose? Kill them both! No.
Though fortunately for the crew member, her colleague refused. And Anna Demetrio, who plays Sophia in A Plague Tale Requiem and the upcoming Resonance A Plague Tale Legacy, demonstrated an uncanny ability to pick the correct one at a glance. Whether we would make similar choices in a real-life situation is a different matter. Being collectively invested in the story, we were engaging in a willing suspension of disbelief, but also complicit in the telling of the tale, meaning that we were able to act in service to the drama and the narrative, rather than whatever our pure instincts might be if this were real life. In the same way that the choices we made in the maze and our shared experience was the most important part of that story, so it is with Directive 8020 as a video game, and other games with similar story mechanics. What choices we made, who we kept alive and who we got killed, as well as what we would do differently. But this isn't that far removed from the stories whose outcomes we cannot affect, where we still dissect the choices made and the meanings behind them, as well as how it could have all been so different. But of course we would do that with stories, because we do that with the real world too. From the personal what-ifs of everyday life to those that dominate the world stage. And just as the mythology of ancient times showed us that, however powerful and unknowable the gods may have been, human heroism and defiance was still possible, and human cowardice and selfishness led only to doom or decline, so modern fiction often serves as a reminder that in the face of all the anxieties of our present and uncertainties of the future, our choices, both individual and collective, still have weight. If you enjoyed this video, then please give it a like. I put out new videos talking about horror stories and video games at least once a month, so consider subscribing to keep up to date and make sure you don't miss out. You can get early access to future videos on both this and my other channel by joining my Patreon for as little as £1 a month. Thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.